You ever get that feeling that some things are just, well, naturally right or wrong? That maybe, just maybe, our moral compass isn't something we just invent, but something we find in the world around us and, inside ourselves? Today, we are diving deep into an idea that has fascinated thinkers for centuries: natural law theory.
Our source text really gets to the heart of this. The core idea, it's actually super intuitive. Think about a racehorse. What makes a good racehorse? Well, being fast, strong, built for speed, it's just fulfilling its nature. Or a chameleon. A good chameleon is one that can blend right into its background. In both cases, nature seems to set the standard. So the theory asks a really simple question. Can we say the same thing about us humans? And yeah, that right there, that's the million-dollar question. It's one thing for a racehorse, but for us, it is a whole lot more complicated. This single question is really what we're going to be wrestling with today. But before we start poking holes in it, we really need to understand why this idea has been so powerful for so long. What is it that natural law theory actually promises?
The theory itself puts it out there pretty plainly, and it's a bold claim. Morality is fundamentally tied to nature. If you act in line with your true human nature, you're doing good. If you act against it, you're doing wrong. It's simple, it's elegant, and you can see why it's so appealing.
So when you look at it like this, you can see how the theory seems to solve some of the biggest, most nagging problems in all of ethics. It promises an objective morality, not just your opinion versus my opinion. It explains why we hold people morally responsible, but, not our dogs. It even gives morality a clear origin story. And maybe the biggest promise of all, it offers a path to figuring out what's right. Just understand what it means to be human.
But as you've probably guessed, that last part, figuring out our own nature, that's exactly where this beautiful-sounding theory starts to run into some pretty serious trouble. This is the central puzzle we have to solve.
So, here's the crucial point. Literally, everything rests on how we define this. If we can't agree on what our nature even is, the whole theory just kind of collapses. So let's look at a few ways people have tried to define it. Okay, idea number one is simple. Maybe our nature is just our animal nature. And sure, this explains some basic drives, but if we actually look to the animal kingdom for a complete moral guide, well, we are in for a serious shock. It can be a brutal, violent place, and that is definitely not a foundation you can build a stable morality on.
All right, what about our innate nature? The traits we're born with before society messes everything up. Well, the philosopher Rousseau, he thought we were born good, cooperative, kind, the whole deal. But then you've got Hobbes, who argued the complete opposite, that we're naturally selfish and competitive. I mean, if Hobbes is right, then following our nature would mean being awful to each other. We can't build a moral theory on a total coin flip.
And that clash between Hobbes and Rousseau really gets to the heart of the problem. Morality isn't about where an impulse comes from. As the source text argues, a horrible act is horrible, whether the urge was innate or something you learned. And a good deed is good, whether you were born a saint or not. The origin just doesn't determine the morality of the action.
So a third try is to say our nature is whatever is universal to all humans. But this idea fails too. For one, it's actually really hard to find a single complex trait that every single human shares. And second, even if most of us were, let's say, selfish, would that automatically make selfishness morally good? No way. Ultimately, confusing what is statistically typical with what is morally right is a really, really dangerous mistake to make.
Okay, so if human nature isn't about being like animals or what we're born with or what we all have in common, what's left? Well, the next move is to define our nature not by our traits, but by our purpose. What are we for?
The source lays out two main secular models here. You've got the efficiency model, which says our purpose is whatever we're best at. But you could argue humans are more efficient at designing weapons than building hospitals, and that would lead to some morally absurd conclusions. So most people pivot to the fitness model. Our purpose is simply to survive and reproduce.
But this fitness model leads to a really dark place. You might recognize this logic as the foundation for things like social Darwinism. A reflection in the source, inspired by Holocaust survivor Primo Levi, shows the horrifying flaw here. If survival is the ultimate good, then the most ruthless, the most treacherous people are actually the most natural. It would make selfishness a virtue and condemn acts of self-sacrifice as immoral. I mean, that's a world without heroes.
So, as a complete theory, natural law seems to be in some deep trouble. But that whole focus on our purpose and our intentions, it wasn't a total dead end. It actually led to a really important philosophical tool for thinking about tough moral choices. the doctrine of double effect.
The absolutely crucial distinction this idea makes is between intending to cause harm as part of your plan versus merely foreseeing that harm will happen as a side effect of an otherwise good action.
And to see how this works, let's use the famous, or maybe infamous, trolley problem. Imagine a runaway trolley is about to hit 5 people tied to the tracks. In one case, you can pull a lever to divert it onto a side track, where unfortunately there's one person tied up. In the second case, you're on a bridge with a very large person. The only way to stop the trolley is to push that person onto the tracks below. So, what do you do?
The doctrine of double effect offers a way to think about this. When you push the person, their death is the means to your end. You are literally intending the harm to save the others. But when you pull the lever, that one person's death is a tragic, foreseen side effect. It's not your direct goal. Your goal is just to save the 5 people. For people who support this doctrine, that distinction makes all the moral difference in the world.
The problem, of course, is that in the real world, this line between intending something and just foreseeing it can be incredibly blurry. Philosophers have been arguing for centuries about how to draw it cleanly. So while the idea is really powerful, applying it with any confidence is a huge challenge.
So where does that leave us? The big promise of natural law was that it would ground morality in the solid facts of nature. But as we've seen, you can't just look at what is natural and automatically know what ought to be moral. Nature gives us our abilities, it gives us our limits, it sets the stage. But it seems we're the ones who have to write the moral script.
And that's the final question I really want to leave you with. The theory offers this beautifully simple vision of morality rooted in our very being. But if that foundation, our nature, is itself a puzzle that has no clear answer, can we ever truly rely on it to guide us through our most difficult choices?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into natural law theory. It's this really enduring idea that morality isn't just random, but rooted in, well, in nature itself.
That's right. The core idea, is that our morality comes from understanding our own nature, our place in the world. It's not just rules we made up.
Okay, so let's break that down. The basic principle is actions are right if they align with our human nature and wrong if they frustrate it or go against it.
Exactly. If they're unnatural for us, it's saying the moral law is the natural law that tells us how to act based on what we fundamentally are as humans.
And that's a crucial point, isn't it? We're not talking about physics, like the law of gravity.
No, definitely not. This is about a moral law tied to our specific biological and even psychological design. Think about it like an oak tree. Its nature is to grow tall, make acorns. If you keep chopping it down, well, things aren't going well for the oak tree, are they?
Right. It's not fulfilling its nature.
NLT basically applies that logic to human behavior. How are we supposed to function?
Which leads us straight to the central mission, or maybe the central problem. What exactly is that human nature?
That's the linchpin. Defining it, or failing to define it properly, is where the whole theory really faces its biggest hurdle.
But, okay, before we wrestle with that huge question, let's talk about why natural law theory is so appealing. I mean, it's been around forever. What makes it stick? The sources highlight 4 big draws, starting with objectivity.
Yeah, objectivity is a huge one. NLT offers a potential solution to moral relativism, that feeling that morality is just subjective opinion. If moral standards are based on a constant human nature,
then they aren't just based on what I think or what our culture happens to believe right now.
Exactly. It means moral truth is independent of us. It allows for the possibility that individuals, or even whole societies, could actually be wrong about morality.
Which is a pretty powerful concept. Nature becomes the ultimate judge, in a sense.
It is. And the second attraction is how it seems, well, uniquely suited for humans. It explains why we have morality and, say, rocks or computers don't.
Because of our reason, our ability to think things through.
Precisely. That capacity for complex, rational thought. That's seen as the foundation of moral agency.
So we're not just driven by instinct. We can choose. We can reflect.
And because we can reason and choose, we're held responsible. A hurricane isn't morally blamed for destruction, but a person who ignores safety warnings and causes harm is. That difference is key.
Okay, third attraction. A clear origin story for morality. It's not something Plato just dreamt up.
Right. It's basically as old as humans are. The theory is straightforward. If there are no humans, there's no human nature, so there's no morality specific to humans. Simple as that.
And the fourth point flows from that, right? It gives us a way to know what's moral.
Potentially, yes. A blueprint for moral knowledge. If NLT holds up, we don't necessarily need divine commands or complex philosophical arguments alone.
We just need to figure out two things. What is our true nature and which actions help us fulfill that nature? Like, if studies showed humans everywhere are inherently cooperative.
Then things like extreme aggression or total isolation would be seen as acting unnaturally, going against our nature, and therefore likely immoral. It suggests a path to moral knowledge through observing ourselves.
Okay, so it sounds really neat on paper. Objective, human-centric, ancient roots, a path to knowledge.
Until you hit that roadblock we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
that definition problem. If natural law is going to give us actual moral rules to live by, we need a really clear, universally accepted definition of human nature, the set of traits that make us us.
And the sources dive into three main ways people have tried to define it, and none of them seem to work perfectly.
No, they all run into pretty serious issues. Let's take the first one.
Conception A, we're animals, so should we just act like other animals, protect ourselves, eat, defend territory, maybe compete?
That's the idea. Look to the animal kingdom for clues. But, well, this one falls apart almost immediately. Because if we take all animal behavior as a guide, we'd have to endorse things we find morally horrifying. Animals sometimes kill their young or attack the weak for no reason. That can't be our moral standard.
Okay, fair enough. We generally think morality involves rising above pure animal instinct. So if looking outward to animals doesn't work, maybe look inward. To innate traits, conception B.
Right. Conception B, innate traits. This is the idea that human nature is what we're born with, before society messes us up or shapes us. The classic nature versus nurture thing. Rousseau thinking we're naturally good, Hobbes thinking we're naturally selfish.
But the problem here, as the sources point out, is that whether an impulse is innate or learned doesn't actually make it moral, does it?
Exactly. That's the killer critique.
Yeah.
Let's say selfishness or competitiveness is hardwired into us from birth. Does that automatically make it okay? Does that make it good?
Probably not. Most moral systems push against pure selfishness.
Right. If you have an innate impulse to steal, well, stealing is still considered wrong. We can't just say, oh, it's natural, so it's fine. What is natural isn't always what is moral.
Okay, so innate traits aren't a reliable guide either. What's the third attempt? Conception C.
Conception C, universal human features. Maybe human nature is defined by the things that all humans, or nearly all humans, share.
So find what's common across the board.
Yeah, but this has two big problems. First, finding truly universal traits is surprisingly difficult. Think about it. Are there desires or behaviors that every single human shares, without exception? Maybe basic survival needs, but beyond that.
Probably not many. And even if we found some.
That's the second, deeper problem. What if the traits we find that are nearly universal aren't very nice? What if, hypothetically, we found that almost everyone tells small lies or feels envy or is somewhat selfish?
You wouldn't want to build our morality on that, saying, well, most people are a bit cruel, so cruelty is natural and okay. It just feels wrong.
It would be an awfully difficult conclusion to swallow, as one source puts it. Just because something is common doesn't make it right. So prevalence isn't virtue.
Okay, so looking at what we are like animals or what we're born with or what we all share, none of these seem to give us a solid moral foundation. Where does the theory go from there?
It has to shift gears. If describing what we are doesn't work, maybe we need to think about what we're for. What's our purpose? Our function? This is moving into natural purposes, or teleology.
Teleology, the idea that things have a goal or an end they're directed towards.
Exactly. Historically, someone like Thomas Aquinas put this in a religious context. God, the intelligent designer, made us with specific purposes. So acting against those God-given purposes, that's immoral because it's unnatural. It's deviating from the plan.
But what about secular versions? Can you have natural purpose without assuming a designer?
People try. The argument shifts towards evolution or natural selection. Just like we can say the natural purpose or function of the heart is to pump blood, and the brain's purpose is to think. Maybe the human being as a whole has a natural purpose derived from how we evolved.
So what could that purpose be? One idea mentioned is the efficiency model. What we're best at defines our purpose.
Yeah, the idea is, what do humans do exceptionally well compared to other creatures? We build complex tools, we reason abstractly, we organize socially.
But wait, we might be good at lots of things. Like, maybe we're also really good at, I don't know, solving crossword puzzles or, sadly, designing weapons. Does being immoral just mean you're bad at puzzles?
That's the problem with the efficiency model. If we have multiple things we're best at, which one is the purpose that defines morality? It doesn't give a clear, single guide. It kind of fragments.
Okay, so if efficiency doesn't quite work, what's the main secular alternative? The sources seem to focus heavily on the fitness model.
Ah, yes, the fitness model. This one is much more focused. It defines our natural purpose based on what's most crucial for evolutionary success, what's highly adaptive. And that boils down to two things.
Survival and reproduction.
Bingo. From this perspective, the fundamental purpose of human life, biologically speaking, is to stay alive and pass on our genes.
And, okay, this model has had huge implications for traditional natural law arguments, hasn't it? It explains why things like contraception or non-procreative sex have often been condemned.
Precisely. The argument is that these actions directly frustrate what the fitness model sees as our primary natural purpose, making more humans. Same goes for arguments against things like voluntary euthanasia, as it frustrates survival.
It seems very neat, almost biological determinism applied to morality, but it feels vulnerable. Does it hold up against real-life situations?
That's where it gets really tricky. The fitness model faces some serious counterexamples. Cases where following the natural purpose of survival and reproduction seems clearly wrong, or frustrating it seems clearly right.
Like the example of a woman needing a life-saving hysterectomy or tubal ligation. A pregnancy would kill her.
Exactly. According to a strict fitness model, intentionally preventing future procreation is unnatural. But nobody would seriously argue her choice is immoral. Saving her life takes precedence.
Or what about acts of extreme self-sacrifice? The soldier jumping on a grenade to save their comrades.
A classic example. That soldier is fundamentally frustrating the natural purpose of self-preservation. Yet we see that act as heroic, noble, the height of morality even.
So it seems you can't just say frustrating a natural purpose immoral. It's much more complicated.
It really is. These examples show that just identifying a natural function or evolutionary purpose isn't enough to generate a complete moral code. Natural law theorists needed something more nuanced for these complex cases.
Which brings us to the doctrine of double effect, right? The DDE.
Yes, the DDE. It's like a supplementary principle used within natural law thinking to navigate these tough moral choices where an action might have both good and bad consequences.
Okay, so what's the core idea of the DDE?
It basically says this: if your goal is worthwhile, you're allowed to perform an action that you foresee will have harmful effects. But T only if you do not intend to cause that harm. The harm must be a side effect, not the goal itself or the means to the goal.
Ah, so it all hinges on this distinction between intending harm and merely foreseeing it.
That's the absolute key. Intention versus foresight.
Let's try an example. Euthanasia. The DDE would say intentionally giving a patient a lethal injection to end their life is wrong because death is the intended outcome.
Correct. According to DDE proponents, the doctor intends the death, even if the motive is compassion.
However, if the doctor gives high doses of morphine intended only to relieve unbearable pain, knowing it will likely foreseeably shorten the patient's life as a side effect.
That might be permissible under the DDE.
Yeah.
The intention is pain relief. The death is foreseen but not allegedly intended.
Okay, I see the distinction they're trying to draw. How about in warfare?
Similar logic.
Yeah.
Terror bombing civilians to break enemy morale, where killing innocents is the intended means to the end that's considered wrong by DDE.
But bombing a crucial military factory, knowing that, tragically, some nearby civilians will likely die as collateral damage.
That could be permissible, assuming the military target is important enough and steps are taken to minimize harm. The civilian deaths are foreseen, but the primary intention is destroying the factory, not killing civilians.
It certainly explains why this doctrine is so debated. It seems to rely heavily on being able to clearly know someone's true intention, which is difficult.
Incredibly difficult, and that's the main weakness, right? How reliably can we distinguish intended effects from merely foreseen ones, especially when the foreseen harm seems necessary to achieve the good outcome?
This is where the famous trolley problem comes crashing in, isn't it?
It really puts the pressure on. You have a runaway trolley, 5 people on the main track, 1 person on a side track. You could pull a lever to divert the trolley onto the side track, saving the 5 but killing the 1.
So if you pull the lever, did you intend the death of the 1 person? Or did you only intend to save the 5, merely foreseeing the 1 person's death as an unavoidable consequence?
It gets very murky, because saving the 5 requires the 1 person to be hit by the trolley. The harm isn't just a side effect. It's part of the causal chain that leads to the good outcome. If the foreseen harm is essential to the good result, the line between intention and foresight seems to blur, maybe even disappear.
And if that line disappears, the DDE kind of loses its power to guide us in these hard cases?
Exactly. Its practical application becomes extremely challenging.
Okay, let's try to bring this all together. We've covered a lot of ground. Natural law theory, its big promise is offering an objective foundation for morality, grounded in nature itself, something solid.
That's its strength, its enduring appeal. It promises a way out of pure relativism, rooting right and wrong in something real about us and the world.
But its core challenge, its weakness, seems to be translating how nature is into clear rules for how we ought to be, moving from description to prescription.
That's the jump that proves so difficult. Nature seems to set limits. We can't photosynthesize, we can't fly by flapping our arms. It defines the boundaries of possibility. But deriving specific, positive moral duties from nature.
That turned out to be really hard. We couldn't settle on a definition of human nature based on animals, or innate traits or universal features that reliably pointed towards virtue instead of vice.
And even when we shifted to purpose, using the fitness model of survival and reproduction, it led to conclusions that clashed with strongly held moral intuitions in certain cases.
Right. Which leaves us with one final, quite provocative thought, kind of circling back to that fitness model.
Yes, the sources touch on something unsettling.
Yeah.
Research sometimes suggests that certain traits we'd normally consider negative, even psychopathic, like reduced empathy, manipulation, superficial charm, might actually correlate with success in some areas of modern life, maybe even reproductive success in some contexts. And there might be genetic links too.
So, if the fitness model is our best bet for a natural purpose derived from evolution, and if these darker traits sometimes contribute to evolutionary fitness, what does that imply?
Well, it forces a really uncomfortable question. If natural law, via the fitness model, ties morality to what's evolutionarily advantageous, could behaviors we typically label immoral actually be considered naturally fit or even good in a purely biological sense?
And taking it a step further, if those behaviors have an innate or genetic component, should we hold people fully morally responsible for them if they're just acting according to their fit nature?
It creates this potential clash between what might be evolutionarily adaptive and what we intuitively feel is morally right. It really highlights the deep difficulties in trying to read our moral compass directly from the book of nature. Definitely something to chew on.